When it becomes a crime is when there is an underlying criminal offense. And of course, your question then is, sorry. Yeah, I tend to move around.
That's
And of course, the question becomes then, how do I know what an underlying crime is? Well, that's one of the reasons why you should report, because you may not know all the statutes and all the different crimes, right? But some of the easy ones for you to recognize is, for example, an impermissible touching, right? That's an assault. If somebody grabs your hijab, now it's not just a negative, hate-filled remark. Now it's an actual assault. That is a criminal offense, for example. Right? If somebody spits at you, if somebody vandalizes a masjid, God forbid, that's an automatic hate crime. Damage to property, touching to yourself are the classic examples of what can qualify as a hate crime. Now, we've been getting a lot of tags on social media. I have to keep track of the time. Somebody better give me a note card about 5 minutes. Okay, he's got that covered. About different things that have been happening, and one of the ones was the street cart vendor. I don't know if a lot of you guys saw it. This guy was being visited by the same guy over and over again, who was telling him terrible things, really just harassing him. Well, I just gave you the underlying crime. It's harassment. But why? It wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't just him going up to the thing and be like, why don't you just go back home and walking away? This guy made it a point to truly harass this individual to the point where it rose to the level of a criminal offense. So when I tell you about hate crimes and I try to distinguish bias incidents, what I'm also telling you to do is don't rely necessarily on you pushing it aside and saying nothing can be done. No, always assume that something can be done, and it's your job to report it to have those who know better to assess whether your specific fact pattern can rise to the level of a hate crime so that it can be prosecuted as it should be. Now, what happens when something rises to the level of a hate crime? What happens when there is a prosecutable underlying offense? Well, once you have an underlying offense, the hate crime statute attaches itself and bumps up the degree of the crime, which means it also bumps up the degree of the punishment. Why is that? Because a hate crime is not just against me if I'm the victim of the hate crime, but rather it's a crime against all of us. Because you were chosen, you were picked on your protected class under the law. In this instance, we're talking about usually religion, we're talking about national origin or ethnicity or your race, your gender. These are all protected classes under the law. So the offense, the hate crime, has to be attacking one of those things, okay? And so if a person actually performed a hate crime against you because of your true or perceived protected class, right? In other words, I'll give you the classic example. We know that our Sikh brothers and sisters have been victimized, right? They wear a turban, people think they're Muslim, they attack them, assault them, say negative, nasty things to them. They're not Muslim. Does it count as a hate crime? Yes, because they were perceived to be Muslim. That's what motivated the hate crime. And so that brings me to the third factor for a hate crime, and that is the motivation behind it needs to be a biased, discriminatory, hate-filled motive, and it needs to rise to a certain level. It can't just be something that's incidental to the offense. I'll give you guys an example. You get into a fender bender, and I'm sure my folks in Nassau County, if I say anything wrong, I'm sure they'll put me straight on, right? But you get into a fender bender, right? Somebody crashes into at an intersection. You say, it was your fault. You should have stopped at the stop sign. He says, I did stop. You gave me the okay to go. And once I did, you decided to slam on your gas, right? And now you guys are at it for 10, 15 minutes each one, and the discussion is getting more and more heated. At this point, nothing is being said about your religion, your race, your ethnicity, your national origin. But at some point, it starts to get nasty, and he says, where did you learn to drive anyway? Why don't you go back to your country? Now you're starting to see some racism there, right? Has it risen to the level of a hate crime? Can you say he slammed into me as a hate crime? No. You understand what I mean? Because that is most likely incidental, right? It wasn't what motivated the original issue, okay? So again, I mentioned all this and the time is very limited. There are many examples that we can give, but the point is that you really need to speak to organizations like Care New York, attorneys. You need to speak to law enforcement in order to determine whether or not it's a hate crime. I will say this though, there are times in which our community believes that something is a hate crime, including our civil rights organization, and law enforcement may not agree with us. In fact, and I'm saying this very openly, and I'm sure and I hope to God that this is not the case within Nassau County, there have been many times which members of our community have tried to put in police reports and they give them really a hard time to actually do the incident report. And then they come back to me and they say, Sister Afaf, you keep telling us report. You know, we tried to report it. The police basically said there's nothing they can do about it, so they didn't want to do a formal police report. And then we have to get involved and we have to push for an incident report. Why is it important? Why do we tell you that you have to stay the course? Why is it that we even invite you to contact us and to let us know so that we can help you to report if there is a situation in which any law enforcement agent, whether it's local or otherwise, is refusing to take that report? A number of reasons. Number one, we need to be able to bring resources and policies that effectuate change for our community. That cannot happen without data. It is extremely important for you to report, even if you don't want to report to law enforcement, at the minimum, report to an organization like ours, even if it's anonymous, even if you don't want to do anything more with it. We need the data so that when we go to policymakers, legislators, and everyone else, we have the data to say X amount of cases have happened. I'll tell you right now, as also asked to speak about discrimination, defamation. You put all these things together, within the past 8 weeks or so, we have received over 200 complaints. 200, just to Care New York, and we know that's a tiny fraction. And I'm not even counting all the things that happen at protests where multiple people report things in a single protest or anything like that. I'm just talking about individual matters, right? And they're all different kinds. Some of them have been hate crimes, some of them have been bias incidents, some of them have been workplace issues, some of them have been school issues, some of them have been about protests, some of them have been about doxing and defamation and so many other things. So I was also asked to speak about discrimination. Are we seeing it? Come on now. At every turn, unfortunately. And what has prompted this is the solidarity that our community is showing to Palestine and against the oppression and aggression that is occurring there. Point blank. Anyone who dares to speak on this issue, even though we are in a free country and you do have that right, is being threatened with a massive silencing tactic campaign. And at the base of it is discrimination. It's also an assault on our freedoms as Americans, right? We all moved here and we're like, what is this? We thought we were in America. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Your rights are not worth the piece of paper that they're written on if you're not willing to advocate for them. Advocating means pushing the limits when somebody tries to silence you when it's within your right to do so. Advocating means refusing to be silenced. Advocating means reporting all hate and bias incidents to the right agencies, law enforcement, nonprofits that deal with this, and other city, municipal, county agencies that also do this, right? And advocating means showing up and being engaged, whether we're talking about this particular issue right now that's happening or any other. And not succumbing to discrimination. And discrimination is any kind of bias that a person has towards you because of, again, usually, legally speaking, a protected class. And FYI, oftentimes the local protected classes are more inclusive than even the federal ones. So for example, New York City has a protected class for a pregnant woman, right? You don't always see all the protections on the federal level. Federal is the minimum base, and then local levels oftentimes have even more protections. Right? So you want to engage with an organization and agencies that are able to help you to navigate through all this. They did also ask me to touch upon defamation. How much time do I have? 5 more. 5? Okay. The reason that defamation is coming up because one of the silencing tactics that we've been seeing oftentimes now with the Palestine Solidarity Movement is doxing. You all know what doxing is? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of yeses. For anyone who doesn't know, doxing is essentially when they take your likeness, a picture of you, and they basically plaster your face on social media, on a truck, on a billboard, whatever it is, means, right? They call you an anti-Semite usually because this is how doxing has been occurring in the current context, right? They can put your image up and your name up and personal information on you on websites like Canary Mission and others that have been doing this for years. This is not new, by the way. This has been around for a very long time. And it's been a frustrating experience for our community because people want to know, can we immediately stop this? But remember what I said about free speech. It's one of the things that makes America America. It's one of the things why we are here, right? I want to be able to call out my president if he's doing something wrong, right? That also means giving availability to things that we may not want to hear and see. Doxing is one of those things except when it's defamation. So defamation is when a person intentionally lies, knowingly lies, right, about you and the information that they've presented about you, right? So defamation happens in one of two ways, slander or libel, depending on whether it's verbal or whether it's publicized written publication, right? But the main thing that you have to understand for that is that there needs to be false information that's being spread against you that's causing damage to you, okay? So I'll give you an example. Somebody says something that I published, they put, in one particular matter, somebody had posted the face of someone and attributed them to a statement that they never made. And that statement ended up causing them harm. So let's say, for example, they lost an employment or a contract opportunity because of it. Now that's defamation. It was false. But you will note that usually in these doxing matters, they are super careful as to what they're presenting about you. They're putting your words or your post in quotes. They're simply taking snapshots. Why? Because they want to circumvent any claims of defamation. So it's a very calculated effort to silence people. And we can talk more about doxing in a separate time, inshallah. But I wanted again to emphasize the difference between hate crimes, bias incidents, discrimination, and then of course defamation on its own. And I wanted again to emphasize the fact that our relationship sometimes to law enforcement agencies, and I say this because that's part of my role here as a civil rights organization. We work with law enforcement agencies. We work with, for example, the hate crimes task forces that agencies have. We work with other agencies, county, city, state, federal, to report these incidents and to try to, of course, push against their proliferation. But at the same time, we also understand that there are many reasons why our communities don't trust law enforcement agencies. And that also needs to be said. And if I don't say it, who's going to say it? The truth is that police enforcement agencies have, especially post 9/11, targeted our community for many years. And that's created a barrier between our relationship. And that's a problem that we have to overcome. And we need to do it with transparency, and we need to do it over time and engagement. And inshallah, God willing, that happens little by little as we keep pushing against surveillance, which we know, by the way, is happening right now. How do I know? Because law enforcement agencies are going even into the campuses of our Muslim students associations. Okay. So this is just factual. So that complicates our relationship. But we want to be able to turn to Nassau PD. We want to be able to turn to law enforcement and say, hey, I've been the victim of a hate crime. You need to do something about it, right? And that's why working together through ICLI, through community organizations, through organizations like ours, and with and inviting PD and talking to them openly and honestly and engaging with them and saying, hey, there's a reason why we don't come to you guys. It needs to be addressed. That's all a part of getting over that so that we, inshallah, become an active community that's engaged, but also is heard, inshallah. I'm going to stop there because I want to afford my co-panelists speaker. And thank you again for allowing me to be here, and we'll take Q&As at the end. Jazakumullah.
Thank you, Sister Afam. I just want to acknowledge a few people. Dr. Zaman, thank you for coming. Dr. Ismat Chaudhry, thank you for coming. Mufti Saab, Jazakallah. Dr. Amin, I know you probably just landed or something, so appreciate you coming. I 100% agree with what Sister Afam just said. In Nassau County, I think we have a good working relationship with the Nassau County Police Department, and we are very appreciative and thankful about it. I think Patrick Ryder, the commissioner, has always been available for us, and we appreciate the partnership. With that said, are there challenges? Of course there are challenges. Challenges are in every relationship, and I just wanted to kind of echo that sentiment. With that said, I'll invite Chief Jim, Lieutenant Jim, to come over and give us an update. Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Muhammad for inviting us. I'll make my little presentation quick so you have more time with the chief. But I'm Jim Patnato. I'm with the Nassau County Police Department's Community Affairs, which is based out of headquarters. It's about 10 police officers, myself and a sergeant, and we do all community engagement. We do recruitment. We do youth programs. So I'll be, you can come see me at the end if you would like a police officer at any of your events or any meetings. We come, and it's a totally positive interactions. We don't do arrests. We don't make tickets. I'm just talking about my officers, not who's on patrol. But I'm just talking. We have the feel good community outreach. A couple of things that have been happening in my office is we just finished up a police officer recruitment drive, which doesn't happen often in Nassau County. The last test was January 2018. November 14th, we wrapped up the recruitment drive. The test will be January of 2024. We are trying to make the department more diverse. We do have Muslim officers, Muslim supervisors, Muslim civilian employees, Muslim dispatchers, and hopefully we have many Muslims that are signed up to take the test in January. We have 34,000 pre-registered, and of course, there's going to be a less number that actually did go through with the formal registration process. I don't have those numbers now, but I know we're definitely north of 10,000 to 12,000, and that will be for the January 2024 test. For people that are not of age to be a police officer, but we do have a youth program, 14 to 21, and it's for young adults who are interested in possibly having a career in law enforcement. I'll leave this flyer over here. It's a great program. We're 13 years nationally ranked #1. It's not my opinion. It's actually, we compete. This year we've been to Las Vegas, Minnesota, Gatlinburg, Tennessee, West Virginia, and at all those competitions we're placed near the top, if not the top. So it's a great program, and the actual highest ranked female explorer is a Muslim female. And I believe she's actually she may not even know this, but I believe she'll be making chief in April. But right now she's an inspector. Yeah, so, and then just something I wanted to mention before I turn it over to the chief is that Dr. Chaudhry here, I think she was mentioned, hi. We spoke about National Faith and Blue Weekend. Yes, we host it's similar to National Night Out, except it's the first full weekend in October every year. It's called National Faith and Blue Weekend. The last few years we've had it at the Shelter Rock Islamic Center that hosted us. And I believe we're going to work with Dr. Chaudhry to host it here. And what Nassau County Police Department does is we have local vendors. The police department comes out with their canine, the horses mounted. Usually the helicopter will fly over. The mascot, Leo the Lion, comes out. Community event, obviously free. We try and have as many giveaways. We do recruitment. We talk about what's going on in the community. So I will obviously call Dr. Chaudhry and figure that out. That'll be for October of 2024. But just to save time, I will wrap up my little presentation, but I'll turn it over to the chief. But I appreciate your time, and this is the Chief Butcher. He's the Department Bias Crime Coordinator. Thank you, Chief.
Good evening, and I really want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I know it's a very cold night. Sister, you really did a great job bias crimes can be very complicated, and I think you got the nuggets out there, so that's really good. My name is Jim Barger. I'm Deputy Chief of Detectives on behalf of Commissioner Ryder, Chief Palmer, who's the Chief of Detectives, and Chief of Department, and Chief Harrow, who's Chief of Detectives. Thank you very much for inviting us. One of the things, as Sister was saying, is the bias crimes are offenses that happen to people, but the state legislature, New York State legislature, does not legislate rude behavior. And a lot of times what we have is very obnoxious, rude, hate-filled behavior. And if it's not a crime, in those instances, we can't make an arrest. However, one of the things that Sister said repeatedly, and I firmly agree, report, report, report. We investigate all incidences. We will explain to you if there's a circumstance where we cannot make an arrest because the law doesn't allow us to. But there are a couple of things that I want to explain how the department investigates bias crimes. And I'm going to speak relatively quickly, more because I want to have an opportunity to have question and answers. And I think that there's going to be a break for prayer, and we'll continue. If that's the plan, we'll be here. Okay, so we want to be able to answer all your questions. I am the bias crime coordinator for the department, but in each precinct, there are 8 precincts in Nassau County, there's a bias crime coordinator for that particular precinct. And it's usually the commanding officer or the deputy commanding officer would be designated as the bias crime coordinator. As Sister said, the problem with hate crimes and bias crimes is they are not only an offense against that victim, they're an offense against the whole community. And because of that, if there is something that rises to the level of being motivated by hate or bias, we have a concern for the whole community. So on each precinct level, I think people know that there is the patrol division in Nassau County, which is the officers that are out on patrol. You see them in the marked units. They will respond initially. And then there's the detective division. We do the follow-up investigation, all right? So in the patrol division, if something happens to any one of you individually, because it's a bias crime, or a determination might be made by the officer who responds that it's a bias crime. He's responding because somebody took the initiative and called 911 and let us know something happened, right? So again, as Sister said, report, report, report. The officer comes down. If he recognizes that this is something that may be, because we don't know yet, it's a bias crime, a supervisor is also going to be assigned down. The reason for the supervisor is let's make sure that we're covering all the bases. Let's make sure we're doing a thorough investigation. Let's make sure if there's damage to your property, let's check the rest of the neighborhood. And as Sister said, you could have damage to your property, but the motivation might be they were breaking into your car to get change. That wouldn't necessarily be a bias crime, but if the perception from the individual is this might be a bias crime, we're going to investigate it and try and figure out what the motivating factor was. That supervisor is going to also let the commanding officer or deputy commanding officer of the precinct know. The reason for that is we may want to reassign our patrol forces to increase patrols in that area to help protect the community because we're concerned of possibly repeat offenders. Or we're going to look to see if this is a pattern. Have we had multiple cases that might be fitting into a pattern and make sure that the detective division is given all those cases to make sure that there's a follow-up investigation. The detective division, they investigate the crime. They're going to interview you. They're going to be looking for ring cameras or cameras, security cameras that you have on your phone to see if we've captured that information. If we have a person of interest, we're going to look at their social media history, their internet history, to see have they been saying things that show a precursor towards hate or bias, and hopefully be able to make a case that if it was bias related, that we have factual basis to support that, right? In my office, every day, my staff and I review any cases that have not only been indicated as being a bias crime or a hate crime, but we'll also look at other cases if it's an aggravated harassment, it's a criminal mischief, it's a robbery. We're gonna look to see, is there any possibility that this was a biased crime, that the patrol division, maybe just the person reviewing it didn't see the possible bias potential. So it's another checkpoint. So patrol has their checkpoints, and then I have my checkpoints. We report on a monthly basis to the chief of department, who's Chief Steve Palmer. And Chief Palmer, we report to the district attorney's office, we report to DCJS, which is the Department of Criminal Justice Services, and we also report to the Nassau County Legislature twice a year. What crimes we've had, what our investigations led to, and whether or not there were arrests made, whether these are repeat offenders, et cetera, et cetera. So the commission reports to the county legislature twice a year. We report on a monthly basis to the Department of Criminal Justice Services and the district attorney's office, and we conduct our own investigations. One thing, Sister Lady said that I just want to clarify a little bit. If somebody puts your hands on you, civilly that might be an assault, but for a criminal charge, unless somebody has a physical injury, it's not an assault. It could be harassment, it still could be an offense, it could still be a bias crime depending on what the motivation is. But the hardest part with bias crimes and hate crimes is being able to establish what the motivation is. I think Sister gave a great example where she was saying you're in a vehicle and traffic dispute and things start getting elevated and elevated and elevated. And at some point, he says something that might be anti-Muslim. He might say something that's offensive to a woman or offensive to somebody who has sexual orientation. That wouldn't necessarily be the motivating factor. So in order to charge the hate crime, we could still charge, for example, if somebody gets physically hurt, we can still charge the assault, and we'll charge the assault. To elevate to the hate crime and to get if there's a conviction, a higher penalty, we have to be able to establish and be able to prove in court that the motivating factor was the bias that they had. So that's where the difficulty comes in. And that's why when we might be initially interviewing, you're saying, he said all these things, or she said all these things, and it was very, very offensive to me. If it's rude and obnoxious behavior, it's not going to be warranting an arrest. But we're not going to just dismiss it. We're going to investigate it. If we can make probable cause, if we can make a case to make an arrest, we're going to make an arrest on that. Okay. The only other thing that I want to, and I'm going to just read, just so that way everybody understands what the categories are that are protected, all right? Because bias crimes is not just natural origin or ethnicity or religion. So bias is defined as a negative opinion or attitude towards a person or a group of persons based on their race, color, national origin, ethnicity, gender identity or expression, religion, religious practice, age, disability, or sexual orientation, all right? So these are the areas that New York State Legislature has said are protected areas. And if somebody is doing something that is an offense under the law, as Sister had said, and their motivation is a discrimination based on these factors, we would then elevate the crime, okay? Where are we at with time for your prayer service? I don't want to interfere with that. 5 minutes. So we're going to start with some questions. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Solomon. I was recently at 8th Precinct with a complaint for a potential hate crime. I'm in the finance business. I'm not aware of what's defined as hateful crime, biases. You guys are the professionals. I walked into the precinct. Officer didn't want to take the report. He just simply said, sorry, that doesn't sound like a hate crime. I said, I got a whole video. He said, all right, let me go talk to my supervisor. He goes to speak to his supervisor. He comes back, yeah, it's not a hate crime. I said, the supervisor didn't even come here to watch the video. And how are you just determining this? And is this your role to determine if this was a hate crime or not? He said, yeah, it is. I don't see any crime happening. It's First Amendment. And he put pushed me back, and I said, no, I'm not gonna take that as an answer, I need you to file a report. Still said no. He goes back to his supervisor, said, please give me your supervisor's badge number, your badge number, because I'm here to make a report. I'm not even a Nassau County president. I was at a protest on Long Island, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it just recently happened, and it was a very, very hateful event that occurred. It had me bored. I've seen little children get really, really assaulted verbally, and the police officer just brushed it off like, it's free speech, it's the First Amendment, and still refused after my second, third attempt. It was after my fourth attempt when I walked outside, I said, let me make a phone call, I'm gonna come back, please see if you're gonna take my report or not. Then he said, okay, I'll take your report. An hour and a half of me waiting outside 8th precinct, when other people walked in, they were welcomed inside the precinct, right? They asked him, what do you want? Go inside. What do you want? Go inside. Me? What do you want? Sit right there and wait right there. I felt discriminated against. I felt like nobody really cared. So for you to stand up here and say, report, 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 the officers don't take this. The officers are the first line, and if they're not trained to deal with this appropriately, I don't know what this community affairs, it makes no difference if the officers are treating this like that. I just want to share that.
Thank you for sharing, and I want to apologize on behalf of the department, because that's not how you should have been treated. Is this from the march that was on Sunday? There was a woman, and many of you probably have seen the video, I think her name is Hockman. Right, we have taken the case, the 8th Squad is investigating that case. The video itself that I saw, and we're very, very preliminary in the investigation, that would not be a hate crime based on the video. But we are still investigating, because what we're trying to find out is, can we identify who it was that she was directing this language to?
You know, it was
Good. We would like that person, that family to come forward, because we need to speak to them. We need to find out what other actions might have taken place. Did they put hands on the person? Did they do something more than yell in the megaphone? And it was important behavior, 100% important behavior. You are right, a report should have been taken. I am telling you that reports were taken and the 8th Squad is investigating, but that doesn't excuse the response that you were getting, and I will speak to the commanding officer of the 8th Squad, of the 8th Precinct.
Officer B. Sisson, SISON, who refused to take the report 4 times. 4 times.
So, right?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Ma'am?
It's the same incident that you spoke of just now, there were police officers present at that time, at that moment, whereas non-police present there.
Right.
And what, I was surprised, I'm sure many others were surprised that she did not step in to prevent that situation from gotten much worse, so they could have not given us this altercation. But, I feel like that the police here should have stepped forward and, made sure that it's not, and that did not happen.
The reason, and again, and I have to be careful with this only because perhaps the video that I saw was different from what you saw. But what I saw in the United States is protected speech. It's obnoxious, it's hateful, it is not appropriate, but we, in law enforcement, can't tell somebody, you can't say that. We can't tell them you have to leave the street. If the person is in a public place and they say, for example, I hate bald men, all bald men are pedophiles, you're a pedophile, blah, blah, blah. It might be embarrassing for me, it might be very offensive to me, but I can't stop that person from saying it.
Right, just think of this weird example, as where the lady whose marriage was the victim of this verbal assault, you know, is that she felt safe, she felt protected, versus, just standing down.
Chief, excuse me, he's going to start the call for the prayer. We'll take a 2-minute break and then we'll. get
Okay.
started.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hey, listen again. How do you turn this off? Maybe why. Let's say yes, we'll
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Bring that over there.
All right, well,
You can speak. Just
we'll
make it
continue for a few more, about 8 minutes, and then prayer, and we can probably see more questions.
Shoot again. Is it on? That's okay. It's on. That's okay. Sure.
Yeah, just to go back to that, again, I would just hope that the police at that time could have, step forward to help protect that mom and her kids. It wasn't just somebody yelling, like, all Muslims are evil or all Muslims are bad. This lady was literally threatening, and inciting violence, saying, that she should be raped, her children should be baked in ovens. So it wasn't, just a freedom of speech thing. I feel like it was something that was very threatening. And I'm sure that this lady and her children were terrified hearing this. And I feel the police should have stepped up. I mean, there was a reason they were present there, that presence was to make sure that everybody feels safe and stays safe.
Several people did indicate that they know who that woman is, and I would encourage if you could have her reach out to the 8th precinct, because we are looking to speak to her and get her perception of what took place. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate you being here. I simply have one question for you. Evidently, we have seen extensive disdain on behalf of our communities for police, not because we consider all police to be horrible people, but holistically, when we look at it in the targeted attacks post 9/11, even the impediment of policemen within schools. I'm not saying Nassau County. But my question to you is this: currently, what are you and your administration, people you're working alongside, doing to combat this hateful? Actually, if it's okay, can I say my question?
Sure.
Okay? Because I don't know what it's like in your business. Sorry. Unfortunately, a lot of individuals have negative feelings against the police. What current proactive approaches are the Madison County Police Department implementing? Are there any trainings you guys are employing to target this prejudice within your own communities? It's very easy to tell us to report, but we are also combating that fear and not hate and anger that's instilled within us. So what are you guys doing collectively to address that?
Very good question. There are several things that we're doing. One, incorporated in our training, and it's been incorporated in our training and developed for, many years ago, I was on the academy staff, and we've been doing it since then. We have a cultural diversity program where we invite in leaders from the different communities. We have representatives from the Muslim community, we have the Muslim.
Use that too, please.
Okay, we have there's a Muslim chaplain now as well, who will speak to our, we call them recruits, new police officers who are hired when they're in training. They speak to our recruit classes, and they get several days of training on being sensitive to community concerns, being sensitive to different cultural differences, with multiple communities. We have from the gay community, from the Hispanic community, from the Muslim community, Jewish community, Asian community, and I'm sure that I'm leaving, did I say Hispanic? So we have that. For even prior to the events that happened over the past 5 or 6 weeks, we have been doing intensive patrols on Fridays for the Muslim community. We do it on a regular basis, but definitely on Friday, there's a sensitivity to being around the different mosques during services. We also have put in place through Jimmy Pettinato's unit. We've spoken to many different community groups. We welcome coming out to speak to the community groups because we do have to communicate, we do have to have an ongoing rapport. I know Commissioner Ryder is extremely accessible and has been in touch with Mohammed and has been in touch with other leaders of other mosques who hopefully are representing the concerns of the community, and the Commissioner is constantly having us redeploy resources as things become needed. So those are things we do.
I'm sorry, may I ask one more question?
Yeah, just hold on one second, Fatma. Just a quick announcement. We will take a break at 8 o'clock for the prayers. Looks like a lot of good questions. So what we'll do is the prayer will take 10 to 12 minutes or 15 minutes. We'll regroup here right after that. But since I have the mic, I'm going to ask one question. There was an incident recently, not in Nassau County, but in a neighboring county, where somebody was hurt, which we believe to be a bias crime. The person did not have all the legal papers or from an immigration perspective. So what can we tell people who are hesitant to come forward because they might not have the proper immigration
Absolutely,
status?
excellent question.
I think you're talking about my brother.
I am not sure.
I think you're talking about my brother. I came here today to talk about that. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm just talking about an incident that I'm aware of.
Seldom does it.
Okay.
In
It happened in Suffolk
Nassau,
County.
I'm sorry?
It happened in Suffolk
Right.
County, and he was brutally assaulted on his way to the mosque in Selden.
Right. I can't speak for Suffolk County. I'm not familiar with what their policies are. In Nassau County, we have this very, and it's been for years, concern that the immigrant population feels that they can reach out to the police. We are not going to ask somebody's immigration status. We are not going to ask, when did you come to the country or whatever, and make a decision whether we're going to assist or not. The reason why we don't do that is if people are concerned about their immigration status and they think that we're going to have that information and then we're going to reach out to the immigration department if they're going to get deported, they're not going to report it to the police. For domestic violence, it's a huge concern. So we in Nassau County, we don't report to the immigration service, we don't ask those questions, and so I don't know what happens in Suffolk, but that would not happen in Nassau County.
So is it policy then that you guys don't work with ICE, and is it a policy, like written policy, that you don't ask about immigration status, or is that just a custom that's?
It's a policy, it's a policy.
Thank you, Chief. At this point, we're going to take a break. I know there are a lot more questions in the room, so we'll do our short prayer and inshallah we'll go down 10 to 15 minutes.
Really important one. Today's Giving Tuesday, right? Today's Giving Tuesday. There's an excellent nonprofit in the house, so I encourage everyone to donate to here.
Thank you.
Here you are.
Yeah, you're.